Okay, everybody set? I understand that, which class is doing all reading all day? You guys too? Holy, everybody. This is awesome because you know what this week is? It's Read Across America Week. And it's because everyone is going to be reading across America. Who loves to read here? Me too. I love to read too. And this week is really special because you know what's one of the things that's so great about reading, besides being fun and educational, is that reading makes you smarter. It doesn't matter what you read, it always makes you smarter. So here's what we're going to do today. My name is DJ MacHale. There's my name right there. There too. Is DJ MacHale. And I am a writer. I am a professional writer. That is my job. I write things. Now think of all the things that are written. Can somebody, quiet, can you raise your hand and tell me something? Wait till I ask the question. Tell me something that is written. Wow. Yep. A book is written. Excellent. What else is written? The Declaration of Independence was absolutely written. Very good. Let's go over here. What? Characters? Yeah, characters written stories and whatnot. Way in the back. What do you say? Yeah. Uh-oh, senior moment. People do the writing. A book about spiders? Yeah. What's written? The school. Well, there's a lot of writing in school. Go ahead. What else is written? Yeah, absolutely, a sentence is written. Okay, think about this. So books are written. Movies are written. Poems are written. Instructions on how to do stuff is written. Music is written. How many of you guys love to sing, "Let it go, let it go"? All right, okay, think about this. Okay. Yeah, that always gets a big that always gets a big reaction, because I promise you, somebody a couple of years ago, probably before you were born, was sitting at home, probably in their pajamas like you guys have on, and they're sitting there thinking, let it flow. Let it flow. Nah, that's not good. I'm going to let it go. Let it go. Big time movie, right? Directions on how to get places. There's so many things that are written, so many different kinds of writers, but we all have one thing in common. We use words to tell stories or to give you information. Now, whether you guys like it or not, you are all either now or soon to be writers. Because you're all going to do a lot of writing for school. You're going to learn how to write words and sentences and spelling and all that kind of stuff. So you guys are all writers, just like me. The only difference is it's my job. And I have the best job in the world because I get to think up stories all day. You want to see how I spend most of my day at work? Okay, it goes like this. Ready? Oh, lunchtime. It's because I'm thinking up stories, and I'm thinking up ways to tell stories all the time. And writing isn't just sitting down and putting words on a piece of paper or on your computer. Writing is thinking about stuff. Think about this. If you want to build a house, you don't just like grab a handful of nails and a hammer and start whacking it into a board, right? I mean, at some point you have to do that. But if you're going to build a house, the first thing you have to do is think of, what kind of house do I want? Is it going to be a big house? Is it going to be a little house? Is it going to be 1 story, 2 stories? Is it going to be brick or stucco? Those are all the different things. That's building a house as much as it is whacking a nail into a board. Well, writing is as much sitting like this, coming up with ideas for stories, as it is writing words down. Now, here's what we're going to do today. I am going to read to you a picture book that I wrote called The Monster Princess. Has anyone read this yet? Oh, so you already know what's going to happen. Okay, don't give it away. Okay? Now, one of the things I'm going to do, one of the things I'm going to do, a lot of times when I go to schools and whatnot, kids ask me, how did you come up with your idea for the story? And usually my answer is, I don't know. I just came up with an idea. But in the case of the Monster Princess, I know exactly how I came up with the story. And I'm going to tell you how. I have a little girl. She's not so little anymore. She's kind of 16 years old now. Her name is Keaton. She's in high school now. But way back when she was younger than you guys, she was in preschool. And one day, I got a telephone call during the school day. And they said, Mr. MacHale? I said, yes. Keaton just ran into the wall. I was like, what? He said, she's okay, but she ran into the wall. Like, I'll be right there. Hung up the phone, drove to the preschool, and I went to pick her up, and to find out, she ran into the wall. And it was an accident. You know, she was, you know what it's like. She's a little girl, she's like, la 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 poof. She ran into the wall. So I'm like, uh-oh. And she was all black and blue. So I'm like, okay, I took her to the doctor. And I went to the doctor. I thought the doctor was going to blame me, like I hit her or something. But I was like, oh, she ran into the wall. So the doctor checked her out and said, she's fine. She says, it looks bad, but she's fine. I said, did anybody like hit her? Like, no. If somebody hit her, she would have said it. She ran into the wall. So she's fine. The very next day, we're home. And she had, like many of you may have as well, in her closet, she had an array of princess dresses. She had the full gamut of princess dresses. You name it, she had it. So on this particular day, she decides she's going to dress up like Cinderella. So she puts on her Cinderella gown and the Cinderella crown. She has a little scepter, fancy scepter, and she's walking around being Cinderella, hopefully not walking into a wall again. And so I took a picture of her because I thought she looked cute. And then I started looking at this picture and I thought, there's a story here. Because here's this cute little girl looking like a princess, also looking like she just was in a fight. And I have that picture right here that I can show you. Hope you can get it. Whoop, Monster Princess. That's the book that came out of it. So I don't know if you could see, but she looked bad. It's worse than it looks. She looked bad. So I thought, you know, there's a story here. Because a lot of times writers write stuff from real life. Said, with all kids have different sides of their personality. I bet you feel this. Sometimes you're like running around, you're active and you're doing stuff. Other times you just want to sit down and relax and read. I found that a lot of times little girls like to dress up in princess, pink and purple and sparkly and whatnot. But then they also like to dig in the dirt for worms. Does anybody else like that here? Yeah, exactly. So that's where I came up with the story of the Monster Princess. Okay? And in fact, you know how in books, I don't know if you know this or not, but when authors write books, they always dedicate the books to somebody. Usually it's somebody from their family, somebody they love, somebody they care about, or a friend, or somebody who helped them with the book. So that's me, DJM, that's me. I dedicated it to Keaton, my daughter. Because who else would I dedicate it to? Because she was the inspiration for the book, so I'm not going to dedicate it to my friend Frank or something. You know, it's dedicated to Keaton. And Alexandra, she did the drawings. I cannot draw. She did the illustrations, and she dedicated it to Victoria. I don't know who Victoria is. Okay, I don't know. I should ask Victoria? I hope not. I don't think so. Okay, you guys ready? So what I'm going to do, you know, one of the beauties of reading a picture book is that there are pictures. And you know, has anyone read your picture book and they're standing there and they're kind of like reading the book and you can't see the pictures? Well, you're going to see the pictures because I'm going to put the pictures up here. So you're going to see all the pages of the book up here while I'm reading the book to you down here. Okay? Here we go. So see, there's the pictures. The Monster Princess by by DJ MacHale. That's me. Illustrations by Alexandra Boyger. That's not me. The Monster Princess by DJ MacHale. It's still by me. Okay, here we go. Ready? Our story began such a long time ago. Or was it last week? We don't really know. A mountaintop castle was home to 3 girls, pretty young princesses, shiny bright pearls. These maidens were precious as 12-carat gems. However, this tale is not about them. Now take a look at this picture. What do we see in this picture? So we see the princesses, and they live in kind of a nice place. It's like they've got cool toys, and that's a picture of their castle over there, and they've got a fire. It's a pretty nice place to live, isn't it? Now look at the picture up on the wall. See the portrait up on the wall? Is there something weird about that portrait? What's weird about that portrait? There's a weird thing sticking out of the portrait. What is that? It's like a strange thing. Let's find out. So, however, this tale is not about them. Down, down, down in places below, the caves can be found where crinkle nuts grow. This world full of monsters is quiet, gloomy. It's dark, it's spooky, it's not very roomy. The creatures who dwell there are called rugabys. They dig up the crinkles and fight off the fleas. The best crinkle digger was Lala by far. So fast, so brave, a rugaby star. So if you look at Lala, that's where Lala lives. And she's looking through a telescope, and where does the telescope go? Up to the castle. So Lala's watching the princesses. That's her telescope that's out of the picture. See the picture up there? That's Lala watching the princesses. And this shows how Lala's pretty cool. Lala, she's running around and she's fast and she's digging up the crinkle nuts and she's helping her brother and sister, and so she's pretty cool. However, oops. But living in shadow just wasn't her style. She wanted some light for more than a while. A princess is what Lala wanted to be, for they sang and danced while she lived with fleas. Her mom kissed her cheek and said, "Try not to care about rings on your toes and the clothes that you wear." She called her sweet daughter, "My star who shines bright." But Lala felt more like a gnome trapped in night. She wanted to dance. She wanted to play. She needed to fly. And today was the day. Up, up, up from the dark of her home, she began an adventure to face the unknown. So check this out. So Lala, that's Lala's mom, all crinkle nuts around there. And you can see Lala wants to be a princess so bad, she has a picture of the castle stuck up on her wall. So she's like, I'm going to leave this cave, and I'm going to go check out, and I'm going to be a princess. So what do you think she's going to do? Uh-oh. In the castle, a chance. The girls weren't around. She crept to their room and tried on their gowns. The dresses weren't hers. She knew it was wrong, but they made her feel special, so she stayed way too long. Uh-oh. Should Lala be in there? No. Probably not. It's probably not a good idea to kind of sneak into somebody's room and try on the dresses. But she wanted to be a princess so bad she did it, but she stuck around too long, so uh-oh, what's going to happen? Don't give it away. You guys already saw it. Uh-oh. A monster! Our dresses! You're stinky! Get out! The girls all near fainted, and would have no doubt. But Lala cried, "Sorry, I just want a chance to live like a princess, to dress up and dance." So the princesses are all freaked out. They're like, there's a monster in my bedroom. The princesses stopped all their shouting and fuss. "You want to be special? A princess like us?" "Yes," Lala begged. "I may look like a brute, but with dresses and jewelry, I could be quite cute." The princesses huddled and hatched a great plan. "All right," they announced, "we'll do what we can." So the princesses look like they're going to give Lala her wish, right? So maybe this is going to work out after all. What followed was magic, a rare dream come true. Relax, the girls said. We know just what to do. So they scrubbed her and clipped her and brushed out the grime. From monster to princess in next to no time. Looks pretty cool. She's getting like a full-on treatment there. It's pretty good. To the ball, they declared. Lala smiled with delight. There's a ball, she squealed, in the castle tonight? I guess princesses, there's always a ball in a castle, I guess. Timing is everything. So this is looking pretty cool, huh? When she entered the hall, it was perfect and bright. But the ending was not to be happy that night. So check this out. So this is Lala's dream come true. She's a princess. She's got a dress. She's going to a ball. This is going to be great. Or is it? Dun, dun, dun. Everyone stared with eyes open wide at the brown little monster who shuffled inside. She wanted to dance, but her claws ripped the gown. She stumbled and bumbled and finally fell down. The people all gaped at the pitiful scene. One laughed, then another, and the sisters turned mean. You're not special at all, one barked with a sneer. You're a monster forever. Now get out of here. It was all a cruel trick from the end to the start. Such a horrible joke that broke Lala's heart. So it was all a trick. The princesses were just making fun of Lala this whole time because they didn't think she was good enough to be a princess. And Lala's embarrassed, and all the people didn't like it. She's like, oh, this is terrible, poor Lala. So what do you think Lala's going to do? So she's all embarrassed and sad, and it's terrible. So down, 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 she fled back to her room. She wanted it dark. She welcomed the gloom. I belong in this cave, forever a troll, doomed to a life in this shadowy hole. All that was left of her hopes was the gown, the torn, tattered dress that brought her dream down. The gown wasn't hers, never was, she now knew, which meant she had something important to do. What do you think she's going to do? Yeah, so even though she was embarrassed, even though they played a mean trick on her, Lala still knew this isn't my gown, so I'm going to bring it back. She had something important to do. So the day after next, up, 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 one more time, to the castle above, she made the long climb. So you can see her there. She looks so little, but she's got the dress she's bringing back. But then, on the way up the path, a shadow arose. Lala crept a bit closer and suddenly froze. She saw the three princesses huddled in fear, trapped by a whiffle who grinned ear to ear. With sour beast breath, the fiend growled out, "My, I'm hungry today for sweet princess pie." So what does Lala do? Lala turned and she ran. So here's this monster called a whiffle, who the princesses are like, la la, having a picnic. Then, this monster's about to eat her, eat them. But Lala turned and ran away. Is this because she's scared? No. She afraid of the whiffle? No. Let's see. Down, down, down. Far below, back to the caves where the crinkle nuts grow. So check this out. So here Lala, she's digging up more crinkle nuts. She's putting them in a basket. She's putting them in a second basket. Third basket. She's coming up out of the cave. She's got all the baskets on her back. And she's, oh, I missed one. Yeah, she's got 3 baskets. And she's coming up out of the cave, and what's she going to do? Said the whiffle, "You first, you look tasty to me. After that, I'll eat you, and you're number 3. Hello, Mr. Whiffle, Lala called with no fear. If you're hungry, my crinkles are waiting right here. So you see Lala over there? She's got all the baskets of crinkle nuts. She just dug up really quickly. Now, whiffles love crinkles. They eat them all day. Dishalish, he crunched as the girls ran away. So what did Lala do? She didn't run away because she was scared. She ran away because she knew how to save the princesses, and that's what she did. Even though these princesses were mean to her, and they made fun of her and all that kind of good stuff, she went and she saved them. "Thank you, dear Lala," they cried with a fuss. "We were wrong. We're so sorry. You're a princess like us." Lala smiled and said, "No, I'm proudly a gnome. Thanks for the offer, but it's time I went home." So Lala realized, you know, I don't really like you guys that much, and I'm kind of happy with who I am, because she went back home. Mom gave a big hug to her star who shines bright and said, "Caves may be dark, but you bring in the light. The once gloomy cavern now had a warm glow. Feeling right with yourself will do that, you know. There are all kinds of special, that's what she found true. Lala's tale is now happy, and yours should be too." So what happened with Lala? Lala was a girl who was, how do you describe Lala? What are some good words to describe Lala?
Well, she had a really dream to be a princess.
Yeah.
Just all those girls made fun of her.
Yeah. But Lala, even when we first met her, even before she met the princesses, Lala's what? What's a good word to describe her? She doesn't care. Well, she cares, but she's caring about the wrong thing. What do you think? Yeah. What? She is, absolutely. She is a go-getter. She's the best crinkle digger of all the ruggabees. She's brave. She's smart. She's adventurous. She has all sorts of stuff going on. But she kind of was thinking she wanted to wear fancy dresses. There's nothing wrong with wearing fancy dresses, but if that's all you care about, that's not very good. So and she learned that lesson. So her true spirit came out when she saved those girls, right? But, oh, you're just stretching. So how else would you how would you describe the princesses? How? Yeah, they're mean. Yeah, they did a mean, I don't know if they're mean girls, but they did a mean thing. What?
She cares.
Lala cares, absolutely. She cares, she knows what's important. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you call your daughter
No, I didn't. No, I call her Kit Kat. But I'll tell you one thing my daughter always says, well, wait a minute. One thing my daughter always said when she was little, she couldn't say delicious, so she said dishlish. So that's something my daughter always did. Any, guys have any questions about anything before I let you go? What? The Whiffle, yeah, the Whiffle is like a scary, go to eat the princesses, but Whiffle's like crinkle nuts better than princesses. And Lala knew that. So that's another thing, Lala's smart. So she saved the princesses because she knew that. So between crinkles and princesses, the Whiffle's like, I like crinkle nuts. And that's what saved the princesses. Yeah? What? Well, because she was a monster and she wanted to become a princess. So she was a little bit of both. Okay, okay. The Whiffle's bad, yeah. But the Whiffle's big and the Whiffle's hungry. So it's better that the Whiffle kind of ate crinkle nuts than people. Yeah. The idea of what? Of the crinkle nuts or the Whiffle? The Whiffle? Well, you know, I wanted there to be a bad guy. And so I thought, well, what's a good fairy tale kind of bad guy? So I just made up. I don't know where the name came from. I just made that up. That's the one fun thing about being a writer. You can make stuff up. And it's like, why'd you call him a Whiffle? I don't know. It sounded good. I love making up weird names like that, like rugby or Whiffle or crinkle nuts. Those are all just made up names for stuff that really doesn't exist, right? So that's kind of fun. I'm sorry, what? Well, you know, I don't write about real stuff. I make up stories. So some of my books take place in America. Most of my books are for older kids. You know, there's no pictures. The Monster Princess is one of the few that I've written for young kids. But you know, one of the things that you find out when you're a writer is that you can't choose what you're going to write. You just write what comes out. So normally I don't write picture books, but I had this really good idea because of her. I said, so I'm going to write a picture book. So you always write about stuff that you know. Yeah?
Which one of your books made your career take off?
Oh, good question. Question was, what book of mine made my career take off? Probably the first Pendragon book, because that's my most popular book. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, exactly. It was the telescope. It's Lala's looking through there, and you notice something at the end. Check this out. Whoop. At the end, she took down the telescope. And well, she put the picture of a crinkle nut over the picture. It's back there, but she covered it up with a crinkle nut. So yeah, she took it down. So she's going to be her own girl from now on. Yes. You forgot? I'll come back to you. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Question is, what does DJ stand for? Depends on who you ask. If you ask my grandmother, it's Don Jr. She has another grandson that's MJ. She has a VJ, and I was DJ. If you ask my mother, it's Donald James. So, whichever you choose. Yes? Lala absolutely has a warm heart. That's very good. Yes, she does. Do you remember your question? Okay. Oh, that's a good question. Question is, do I like to write chapter books or picture books? I'm better at writing chapter books. Writing you may not believe this, but writing a picture book is really hard. It's really because all that rhyming that I did that sounds kind of okay and works, that took a lot of work. Holy mackerel. There must have been many, many drafts of making it just right. And you have to get the balance between how much of the story is told with the words and how much is told with the picture. So it's a real challenge. I'm better at just writing words. You what? Okay. Who else has a good question? Yes, ma'am. No, not you. I'll get you next.
Do you do your own illustrations, or do you have somebody?
No, I can barely draw breath.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I answered this question before, that when I wrote the story before there was an illustrator.
Oh, okay.
And the publisher said, well, what kind of illustrations do you want? And I had something in my head, but there's no way I could draw it, because it would look like, stick figures.
Yeah.
So I went to a convention, a book convention, and they had all different booths set up with all different kids' books. And I thought there's a good chance to see all different kinds of illustrators. And I saw this book, and I'm forgetting the name of it now. It was like a light was shining it from the heavens, like, oh, oh. And I was like, that's it. That's the look I want. And I went to my editor and I said, how about Alexandra Boyger? Where is she? Oh, she's not there. Well, how about Alexandra Boyger? And they're like, we love her. So we got her. So that's how it worked out. Yeah. Yeah, you had a question, right? Yeah, this is the one. If you come to later assemblies, I'm going to read other books. Yes? What, say again? Very good. She said there's an exclamation point when the whiffle came. What does an exclamation point do? Yeah, what does it do? That it is. Yeah, it's like for emphasis, like woo. When you really want to make your point, you want to say, this is important, ooh, exclamation point. Sometimes you can use them too much. And it's like, okay, enough, fine. But if you really want to say, my. By the way, this is weird. The book actually looks, the printing of the book looks much better than that. When I translate it to the screen, it looks kind of cheesy, but it's much better than that. Yes? When did I write the book? This book came out in before you were born. Probably 2000, I can tell you. 2002? No. It was later than that. Came out in someplace 2010. Not before you were born. Yeah, it was before you were born. So 10 years ago. So figure it out. If my daughter is 16, it takes a couple of years for books to come out. So if my daughter's 16 now, and this book came out in 2010, she was how old when it came out? 6. And when I wrote it, it was probably 2 years before that, so I probably wrote it in 2008. It takes a long time for books to come out. Like when I'm writing a series of books, readers are always like, write faster, I want the next book to come out. I'm like, I finished the book. It's up to the publisher to put it out. It takes a long time for books to come out. So usually, once you start a book, it won't come out for a couple of years. Especially you have to do illustrations and all that kind of stuff. It takes a long time. Okay, let's do 2 more questions. Who has, these have to be really good questions because you want everyone to go, oh, that was a good question. Yes? Yeah. You know what's funny? The first book I made was even long before that, before I knew I was going to be a writer. Because you know, most of the stuff that I've done, I made a lot of TV shows. That was really the first thing I started doing. But even before I started doing TV shows, I wrote a picture book called East of the Sun and West of the Moon. And somebody brought it in today and I actually signed it. But I didn't start writing books full time for like another 10 years, 10, 15 years. So it was called East of the Sun and West of the Moon. Okay, one more question before you guys have to leave. And this has to be the most important super galactic question that everyone's going to say, that was the best question. I'm kidding. You can ask whatever you want. Go ahead.
Why did you start making books?
I have a good answer to that. Question is, why did I start making books? And the answer is, I've always been a storyteller. But what I first did was I was making TV shows. So I made a lot of TV shows for kids. Probably all shows you've never heard of before. There's one show that I did that has just been rebooted. 2 shows have been rebooted. One is called Ghost Rider. It's on Apple TV. I wrote the, did you see that? I wrote the, did you see the Ghost Rider? Did you see the one about the Western one? About the, no, I didn't. Because if you get Apple TV, they have a show called Ghost Rider. And Ghost Rider was a TV series from back in the 1990s. And I wrote it back in the 1990s. But they rebooted the show. And it's about literacy. It's about kids who have a ghost friend. And the ghost friend allows them to jump into books. No, I'm sorry. The ghost friend allows characters from books to come out. And the mystery is the kids have to figure out how to get the characters back into the books. So the first 2 stories they did, one was Alice in Wonderland, when all like the White Rabbit and the Mad Hatter came out of the book. The second one was the Jungle Book. So Mowgli came out and all the things. The third book they came out of was an original. They came to me and said, would you write a book for us that we can have the kids come out of? So I wrote this book, Trinity. This is the book that's in the Ghost Rider TV series that the kids take off a shelf and they say, oh, it's a book by DJ MacHale. And the characters from the book come out. So if you ever see Ghost Rider, Trinity is my book. So you didn't see this one?
No.
Okay.
I
Did you see it?
saw it.
So you saw when the characters come out and they're cowboys that come out? I haven't even seen it myself, to be honest. But you did see it? So to answer your question, so I made a lot of TV shows for kids. Oh, the other show that's been rebooted is on Nickelodeon. It's called Are You Afraid of the Dark? Did you see the reboot that was out a couple months ago? It's a real scary show. Yeah. What?
I was watching my dad when I was like 5 years old.
Oh, did you really? That was my show. So I'm getting back to your question. So I made a lot of TV shows for kids. And part of that is writing. You have to write scripts. So what I found is that now the script isn't the final show. Because when you write a script, then a lot of stuff happens. You have to have actors and directors and music and editing and lighting and all that kind of stuff. So the end user, guys like you, no one ever got a chance to read my scripts. But the people who did read my scripts, people I work with, said, hey, DJ, we really liked reading your script. And it's not just because we think it's going to be a good show. We really enjoyed reading the script itself. So that gave me the confidence to say, you know, maybe I can write something that goes directly to the readers. So that's why I started writing books. And it took off. I didn't think it was going to be successful, but it did. So I got a chance to write. These are just like the beginning books of each big series. So it worked. So that's why I started writing books. Okay, you guys, we are about out of time. You guys have until 10 o'clock and you're out of here. So unless you have any other questions, I'm going to turn you back over to your teachers. And thank you very much for coming today. And I hope you have a good day reading. It's been a lot of fun. Bye. You what? I think about 25, maybe even more than that. Did you like the Monster Princess? Good, I'm glad. I'm so happy. Oh, you want me to sign that for you? DJ MacHale. We'll do questions later, okay? Alrighty, I guess we'll get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is DJ MacHale, as it says on the books up there. And happy Read Across America Week. Yay! Who loves to read? Yes, I love this. Who doesn't love to read? Who is too cool to raise your hand no matter what I ask? Okay. Here's what we're going to do. First of all, thank you very much for having me here today on this special week, this Read Across America week, and I guess Read Across America Day, too. I think today might be the day. But I'm here mostly because of Ms. Seaborn, who asked me to come here today, so you can thank her. If you like my talk, if you don't like my talk, you can blame her. But now, you have to thank me for getting you out of class. Thank you, yes. I know. I know how that works. I know how that works. Who's talking today? Who cares? No math. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and how, because I'm a writer. I'm an author. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and how I got to do what I do, and that led me to standing here in front of you guys on Read America Day, Read America Week. And then I'm going to read a couple chapters from one of my books to you guys, because that's what today is all about, is reading aloud, okay? Ready for that? Okay. Now, as I said, I'm an author. I'm a writer. I'm a professional writer. That is my job. My job is to make stuff up. It's an awesome job. There's all different kinds of writers. There's writers write books. Writers write TV shows. They write music. They write poetry. They write instruction manuals on how to do stuff. They write directions on how to get places. Someone in the class asked before, a young guy said, what's written? And he said, the Declaration of Independence. Absolutely, somebody wrote that. Everything had to be written. I happen to write books, and these are some of my books here, like the beginnings of a number of different series that I've written. And I also write TV shows. And I'll tell you a little bit how I got to do that. Now, first of all, I'm going to ask you guys a question. Now, this is a quiet question. This is just a show of hands, okay? How many of you guys, be honest, hate to write? That's not a lot. Okay, hands down. How many like to write? Wow, that's a lot. Okay, hands down. Now, whether you guys like it or not, especially you guys who don't like it, I have bad news for you. You are all writers. You have to write for school, right? You have essays to write and papers and paragraphs. You're all writers. And you're all readers. The awesome thing about reading is that reading makes you smarter, no matter what it is you read. If we have time at the end, I'm going to tell you a good story about that. Now, the reason I asked about the hate to write thing is because when I was your age, I'm not kidding, when I was your age, I hated to write. I hated everything there was to do with writing. I hated having to sit still in a chair. I hated not running around outside. I hated looking at a blank piece of paper and I fill up with words I did not care about. But you have to write for school. And you guys, every once in a while, you get an assignment, you have to hit a word count. Like, write a 300-word report on the Titanic. I would count the words. So my reports would sound like this. The Titanic was a very, very humongously big boat. And it was so very horribly, tragically sad when it sank in the deep, dark, cold, murky waters. You know, as many words as I come up with to fill it out to get the word count, because I hated to write. But things changed for me actually in middle school because there was a guy who worked there. He was a teacher. He was the media specialist. He wasn't a librarian. He was the media specialist. And one day he called me into his office and he said, "Hey, DJ, we just got this thing in. Do you want to use it?" And he called it, he called it a crying little boy. No. He called it a portable videotape recorder. Oh, poor guy. Oh. He called it a portable videotape recorder. Now this was, oh, poor guy. Oh. So he said, "This is portable videotape." And believe me, back in those days, there was nothing portable about it. It was like this big thing. And he said, "Do you want to use it?" And I said, "No." Oh. You want to come up and sit here? It's okay. Why don't you go up and sit? You want to sit with me?
I do.
You're not crying. Okay. So what I did was, I thought, oh, this is awesome. Rather than having to write the reports, I'd make a videotape about the subject instead. So, we did all sorts of, we did informational science videos, and we did comedies, and we made dramas. And now, how many of you people here, kids here, and I bet it's nobody, knows who the Marx Brothers are? No, you don't know the Marx Brothers. Marx Brothers were a comedy team from back in the 1930s. They made a lot of movies. They're very famous. That's not them. What we have here are 4 slackers who, in order to get out of writing a paper about the Marx Brothers, because we hated to write, we made an original Marx Brothers movie instead. That's actually me being Groucho on the side there. So we thought we were so smart because we were getting out of writing, we were having fun, and because back in those days, kids weren't really making videos and stuff, so teachers had no idea how to grade them. So we always got A's. But the joke was on us, because we thought by getting out of writing, we were doing nothing but writing. Because writing isn't just putting words on a piece of paper. Writing is coming up with ideas and concepts. It's like building a house. If you're going to build a house, you don't just run out and grab a handful of nails and start whacking it into a board. Before you do that, you have to think of the big picture. What kind of house do I want? It's going to have 2 stories? Is it going to be ranch? Is it going to be stucco? Is it going to be brick? Is it going to be blue? Is it going to be all the big concepting stuff? That's as much building a house as it is putting nails into a board. Well, writing is as much thinking of ideas and coming up with stories and learning about stuff as it is sitting down there writing words. I didn't know that, but I like telling stories. So when I went to college, I went to study filmmaking, to be a director or a producer. None of this writing stuff. And the very first day in class, I went to the teacher and I said, "This is going to of writing class. I had to take writing. I went to the teacher and I said, "This is going to be ugly." And she said, "Why?" I said, "I hate to write." And she laughed at me. I said, "Why are you laughing?" She said, "DJ, you like to make up stories, right?"
Yeah.
And you like telling people your stories?
Yeah.
And based on the reaction you get, you actually change your story, you make it funnier or scarier, whatever you're trying to do?
Yeah.
She said, "Well, doofus, what do you think writing is?" Like, oh. So all that time in high school, I thought I was getting out of writing. Said, "You probably wrote more than any person who ever went through that school." Like, well, okay, fine. All right, now I feel kind of dumb, but all right. I still don't like looking at that blank piece of paper, but I like telling stories. So I got out of college, I'm writer man. Now what? Exactly. Now what? Here's a trick. If you want to do something creative with your life, you can't necessarily choose what it's going to be. Because what you create has to come from in here. And everyone is different. So when I got out of college and I started writing all the wrong stuff. I started writing these deeply dramatic, adult, grown-up stories about people in trouble and strife. And I was getting nothing but no. Till a friend of mine said, "Did you ever think about writing for kids?" And I said, "No." "Well, my Dr. Seuss, I'm not going to write for kids. Get out of here." But I started thinking about it. I was like, I don't want to write for kids, but if I did, what would I write about? And suddenly the floodgates opened. All these ideas started coming out. I'm like, whoa, I may be slow, but I'm not dumb. Maybe I should write for kids. So I did. The first stuff I did, I started writing and producing TV shows. Now, all these shows are going to be before your time. One may not be. But you may have heard of them. Who here has read the Encyclopedia Brown books? Encyclopedia Brown, Boy Detective. I wrote the one and only TV version of Encyclopedia Brown. It was on HBO. Who watches Nickelodeon? I created a television show that ran all through the 90s since 2000 on Nickelodeon, and it's just been rebooted a couple months ago, called Are You Afraid of the Dark? Did you see the new Are You Afraid of the Dark? Yeah. So that was my show. I created that. In fact, that's the 90s me with my Midnight Society, with a beard and all that kind of stuff. This next picture is kind of cool. This was, because I'm a director too, so this was a behind-the-scenes shot that was taken while we were waiting for the shot to get set up, and it was a story about a vampire. So I'm standing there on the set with the vampire, and I thought, wonder what happens when you bite the neck of a vampire. Wonder what's going to happen. So I bit the neck of a vampire. Nothing happened. I don't think he was a real vampire. One funny thing about this picture, I showed this picture at a school a couple years ago, and somebody in the back went, "Ew, is that Michael Jackson?" I said, "No, that's not whoa, that looks like Michael Jackson." So I'm going to start telling people that Michael Jackson was in Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's not like he can deny it anymore. Who here, I got to ask you a really dumb question. Who here has been to Disneyland? Just down the street. Who here, hands down, who here has ridden the ride formerly known as Tower of Terror? Okay, and then it's now Guardians of the Galaxy. So I was the first guy who made a movie based on a Disney theme park ride called Tower of Terror. It was on the Wonderful World of Disney. And the last show I did was kind of in the late 2000s, called Flight 29 Down. If you ever saw that? About kids that crash landed on a tropical island. No one heard of this until High School Musical came out. Did you ever see High School Musical? Because Corbin was in High School Musical. So, but then I had an idea. It was an idea that was kind of too long for a movie and too expensive for a TV show. So I thought, I'm going to write a book. And I sat down to outline this book. And in the process of outlining it, this isn't one book. This could be 10 books. So I did a whole presentation, and I went to my management company, and I said, I want to write a book series. What do you think? And this guy said, nope, this is terrible. No one's going to want to read this. It's the worst thing I ever read, and you're ugly. He didn't say that last part, but it felt like it. So my advice to you guys right now is you can never take no for an answer. Because I took my presentation, I went, okay, thank you very much, give me that back. And I went into the next office, and I gave it to this guy. And I said, what do you think? This guy didn't say no, he didn't say yes, he said maybe. Maybe is better than no unless it comes from your parents. It's in the parents' handbook, maybe equals no. Can we go to the movies tonight? Maybe. You're not going, just so you know. But in this case, maybe became yes. And about a year later, my first Pendragon book was published, Pendragon, the Merchant of Death. We've got those here right now. And I didn't even think it was going to get published, but it got published, and it became a huge success. It became a huge international success. It was in like 30 different languages. It's all over the world, and there's spin-off books and graphic novels, and all 10 books got published. And because of all the success of those books, it allowed me to write a bunch of other books. So that's how I got to be standing here today. That's a quick thumbnail of my career as a writer. Now, this is Read Across America Week, Read Across America Day, I think. Read Across Fullerton Elementary. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to read a couple of chapters of one of my books for you guys, okay? The Curse of the Bargain. In case there's any confusion, because there will be confusion, the hardcover version of this book is Curse of the Bargain. The paperback version of this book is Surrender the Key. Don't even ask. The publisher wanted to change the title. The series is called The Library. And what the concept is, I like scary stories, as you can see from Are You Afraid of the Dark? I like writing scary stories. And one of the reasons I like scary stories, I don't like horror stories. I don't like the, like, blood. I don't like horror stories. But I like spooky stories. And one of the reasons I like spooky stories is because there's always a mystery. If there's a ghost that's hanging around, there's a reason they're hanging around. And that's what the mystery is. So it's up to the characters in the book and the readers to try to figure out what the mystery is, what the ghost is up to. Sometimes the ghost is up to good things, sometimes the ghost is up to bad things. But it really is a mystery. The concept of the series, The Library, is that there is this kid who has a key. This key works on any door. I can walk over to that door over there and put the key in, and a magical little keyhole appears. And I can use this key, and it will open up the door into the library. The library is filled with stacks of books of unfinished scary stories that are true. So it's up to our kids, the main kid and his buddies, that can actually jump into these books and try to solve the scary stories. They become part of the scary story. That's the concept. And so once they complete the story, the book can leave the shelf and go onto the finished shelf. So that's the concept of the series. We'll do questions at the end. That's the concept of the series, The Library. So what I'm going to read today is 2 chapters from the first book, called Curse of the Bargain or Surrender the Key, depending on which edition you have. I'm going to read the prologue, and I'm going to read the first chapter. The reason I do that, the prologue kind of sets up the mystery, which you'll find out as soon as I read it. But it doesn't introduce the main characters yet. Chapter 1 introduces our main characters that carry all the way through. Okay, make sense? Here we go. Curse of the Bargain or Surrender the Key, depending on which edition you have. Prologue. It was under the bed. Parents always tell their children there's nothing scary down there, or lurking in the deep depths of a closet, or hiding low in dark shadows. That's what parents always say, and they're right, most of the time. Alex Sweener had something under his bed that night, and it wasn't just dust bunnies. Again, his mother, Lillian, asked with frustration. I've checked under there every night for a week, and I always find the same nothing. I'm sorry, Alex complained. It's not my fault, I keep hearing things. Alex's bedroom was a typical 9-year-old's room. The walls were covered with Avengers posters. A small desk had a computer that was mostly used to play Minecraft, and a long shelf held a vast, I should have written, what's the newer one? Fortnite. I should have written Fortnite. It was mostly used to play Minecraft, or Fortnite. And a long shelf held a vast collection of his favorite books, mostly Pendragon. Oh, no, that's not it. He watched nervously from a safe distance as his mother knelt down next to the bed to examine the dark below. Mrs. Sweener got down low so that her face was barely inches from the floor. She lifted the Jedi bedspread, peered underneath, and ah! Alec jumped back with surprise. I told you! I don't believe it, his mother exclaimed as she reached under the bed and pulled out a plate of day-old scrambled eggs. She held out the congealed mess as if it were diseased. You told me you finished your breakfast, she said, annoyed. Alec let out a relieved breath. I ran out of time. It was either you eat breakfast or tie my shoes. Or you could have gotten out of bed 10 minutes earlier. I'm sorry, I was tired. I haven't been sleeping so hot. Mrs. Sweener softened. I know, sweetheart, but please, believe me, there's no boogeyman down there. She kissed Alec on top of his head and walked toward the bedroom door. I love you, even if you are a nut job. She left with a plate of stinky eggs, passing her husband, Michael, who was watching the scene from the door, looking more worried about the situation than his wife was. You okay, bud? He asked his son with genuine concern. Yeah, Alec replied, embarrassed. Want to sleep with us tonight? Nah, I'm being dumb. No, you're not. You know you can always shout, and we'll come running no matter what, okay? Okay, Dad. Good night. I love you. Love you too. Michael Sweener gave a last concerned look to his son, then left, gently closing the door behind him. Alec gazed across the room to his bed. It was as normal as any bed on the face of the planet. He had absolutely no problem with it, till a few days ago. It began with subtle scratching, as if rats were scurrying below. The Sweeners' apartment was on the top floor of an old 4-story brownstone in New York City. It wouldn't be weird for rats to be scampering under the floorboards. Then came the knocking. Rats didn't knock. Alec would run out of the room and drag his parents back in to listen, but each time the sounds had stopped before his mom and dad arrived. During the day, Alec felt silly for being so scared, but at night, when all was quiet, things were different. Alec sprinted across the floor and flung himself the last few feet into the bed in case blood-soaked claws were waiting to reach out and grab his ankles. He dug under the covers, lifted them up to his chin, and listened. Nothing. All he heard was the far-off wail of a police siren and the white noise of the city beyond his closed window. He believed his mom. There was no boogeyman under his bed. It was silly to act like a jumpy 2-year-old instead of a mature 9-year-old. He scrunched his eyes shut, and after a long 20 minutes, he fell asleep without having heard any weird sounds. All was well, until just after midnight. There's no logical reason why strange doings began when the day changes, but that's often how it goes. The scratching returned. Alec's eyes snapped open as though he had heard the crash of a cymbal. He lay very still. Whatever was under his bed was back. His panic grew and his mouth went dry. He wanted to yell for his parents, but his throat was closed so tight he couldn't utter a peep. Then came the knocking. Whatever was down there was alive, or at least alive enough to be making sounds. He couldn't take it anymore. He had to know what it was. Slowly, moving his body as if it weighed a ton, he peered over the edge of the bed toward the floor. His Jedi blanket was half off the bed and bunched below. Moonlight streamed in through the window, providing enough light for Alec to make out the image of Chewbacca with his head thrown back mid-roar. All was normal. Until the blanket moved. Oddly, it didn't scare him. Instead, it confirmed that something was really there. Something normal, something real, nothing spooky. It was probably a rat. Alec hated rats, but they didn't scare him. Enough. He reached down and yanked the blanket back. What he saw was something far stranger than a common rat. Words were scratched into the floorboards, words that hadn't been there before. They looked to have been crudely scraped by a knife or a claw. Alec had to lean down close to read them. Surrender the key, he read aloud. He reached to the floor, wanting to touch the etched letters to figure out if they were real or a trick of light. His hand slowly dropped lower, growing closer to the mysterious message. As his fingertips were about to touch the odd markings, an ominous growl came from under the bed. Rats didn't growl. Alec pulled his hand back quickly and cowered against the wall as the Jedi blanket came to life. It flew across the floor to the center of the room, stopped suddenly and fell to the floor, revealing the culprit. It was a dog, a pit bull. Its head was nearly as large as its muscular body, with jaws that split the skull like a leering jack-o'-lantern, with teeth. Fangs, actually. The beast turned to face Alec intent, staring him straight in the eye. This was not a friendly dog. "Dad!" Alec called out weakly, fearing his words might trigger the beast. The animal stood between him and the door, its body as tense and tight as a banjo string, staring at Alec. Alec glanced toward the window above his bed. It was his only option. He lunged for it, threw it open, and rolled out onto the metal landing of the fire escape. Behind him, the dog sprang. "Dad!" Alec finally shouted out. He slammed the window shut as the powerful animal launched. It drilled the glass with its head, creating a spiderweb of cracks. The window didn't shatter, but that didn't stop the beast. It hammered away at the glass, butting with its head again and again, determined to break through. Alec had to move. His family's apartment was on the top floor. Climbing up to the roof would be fast and easy. He grabbed the metal rungs of the ladder and made the short climb. He was only a few feet from the top when the window below him shattered, and the dog blasted out through an explosion of broken glass. Alec froze and looked down to see the animal staring up at him with angry red eyes. "Leave me alone," he screamed at the beast. He threw himself over the safety wall onto the black tar-papered surface and ran for his life. It was the dead of night. The only light came from the city and the moon and stars above. He dashed to the far side of the roof, hoping there would be another fire escape. When he reached the edge of the building, he looked over to see no fire escape. He spun around, frantically looking for a doorway that might lead him back down to the 4th floor. What he saw instead was the pit bull standing on the far edge of the roof, staring back at him. How did it climb the ladder? Alec thought. He didn't have time to come up with an answer, because as soon as the dog locked eyes with Alec, it leapt off the safety wall and ran directly toward him. Alec spun around, desperate to find an escape route. This time he saw something he hadn't noticed before. A metal ladder was attached to the outside of the building. How could he have missed that? Didn't matter, it was his only hope. The vicious dog was halfway to Alec and charging hard. Thick slobber flew from its mouth as it bared its sharp fangs. Alec had to move. He ran the few feet to the top of the metal ladder, threw his legs over the edge, and began to climb down as the ladder disappeared. Vanished. Poof. Gone. Alec had already committed to going over, and he fell. Desperately, he grabbed for the roof and managed to catch the edge. He hung there by his fingertips of both hands, his bare feet dangling 4 stories above the hard pavement. So many thoughts flashed through his head. How could I have been so stupid? Why did I think there was a ladder? Will the dog bite my fingers? The dog. Alec heard the scraping of its claws as it arrived at the edge of the roof. He looked up, expecting to see the dog looming over him, dripping slobber. Instead, peering down at him was an old woman. "Help me," Alec called to her. She had waist-length gray hair and wore a long forest green dress. Over it was a black shawl that she clutched to her chest with a bone-white hand. The tendrils of hair blew about her head like a pack of wild dancing spirits. Though her face was pale and wrinkled like that someone 100 years old, her eyes were focused and alive with fiery madness. Alec's brief moment of relief was shattered when he looked into those horrible eyes. "Dad!" he screamed in desperation. He didn't have the strength to hang on much longer. "Save me!" he cried to the woman. "Please!" The woman leaned down over the edge to stare him straight in the eye. "Oh no," she replied in a low, dark voice that sounded like the hollow echo from an empty grave. "That wouldn't help me at all. Now, if you don't mind, please fall." "Dad!" Alec screamed again and lost his grip. His fingers slipped off the edge and he began to fall as a hand shot down and grabbed his wrist, stopping him from a death plummet. He was quickly hauled up and over the edge as if he weighed no more than one of his Transformer toys. A second later, he was deposited safely on the roof. "Dad!" Alec cried and threw his arms around his father. "You're okay," Michael Sweener said soothingly as he hugged his son to his chest. "I promise." "Where is she?" Alec asked, looking about with fear. "Where did she go?" "Who?" "The old lady. She wanted me to fall. And there was a dog under my bed and a ladder, but it disappeared. I swear, I'm not lying." "I know you're not lying," Mr. Sweener said, his voice cracking with emotion as he fought back his own tears. "Let's get back to your mother and we'll talk about it." Alec reluctantly released his bear hold on his father. "Do you know what happened, Dad?" he asked. Michael Sweener took a deep breath before replying, as if the answer pained him. "I do, and it's a long story," he finally said. "It's time you heard of it. All of it. Your mom, too." "So you believe me?" Alec asked, finally getting control of himself. "I do." Michael Sweener stood up and reached his hand down to take his son's. "Let's go see Mommy." They never connected. The pit bull was back. It came charging across the roof like a runaway freight train. "Look out!" Alec screamed. Michael Sweener barely had time to look up before the dog leapt at him. He instinctively backed away, but he was too close to the edge of the roof. He stumbled, hit the low safety wall, and tumbled over. "No!" Alec screamed. In the bedroom below, Lillian Sweener heard the scream. Her entire body tensed as if she'd been hit with an electric prod. She was momentarily frozen, unsure of what she should do. In her heart, she knew there was nothing. She looked around at Alec's room as if she might find an answer there. The window was open. It wasn't shattered, it was just open. Michael had opened it when they came running in after hearing Alec's frightened cries. There was no broken glass, No hint of the terror that had visited Alec and chased him onto the roof. There was only one clue to the mystery that remained. Mrs. Sweeney looked down at the floor through tear-filled eyes as if in a dream. She ran her fingers across the words that had been carved into the wood. Surrender the key. The words were still there. Oh, Michael, she whispered to no one. What have you done? So that's the prologue to the story. I can keep going reading. We have a couple of minutes left. I don't think I'll get to the end of the chapter. Should I keep going? Yeah. Okay. At least you get a chance to meet our main guy. Okay? Chapter 1. Use your brains, people, for a change. Mr. Windsor commanded impatiently as he prowled the aisles of third period social studies class, hunting for his next victim. Windsor had been teaching 7th grade social studies since before I was born. Maybe before my parents were born. He was a fossil who wore wide ties that were so ugly I couldn't tell if the hideous pattern were intentional or just a bunch of stains from spilled food. Can someone please offer me an intelligent response? He asked with disdain. What were some of the negative impacts of evolution between the Homo erectus period and the Homo sapiens period? Windsor spun and pointed his finger at an unsuspecting girl. Miss Oliver, he declared. Gwen Oliver sat bolt upright, as if lightning had flown from Windsor's fingertip. Gwen wasn't a social studies scholar, or a math scholar, or any kind of scholar for that matter. She was the kind of girl who did her best to get through the day without having to think too much, or at all. She said, hoping Windsor would move on. Unacceptable, he shouted. He said that a lot. Stand up, get the blood flowing to that underused brain of yours. Gwen gave him an uncertain look and didn't budge. I said, stand, Windsor barked. She stood slowly with her shoulders slumped while tugging at her long auburn hair nervously. All eyes were fixed on her. If it wasn't her worst nightmare, it sure came close. Now, fill the room with your knowledge. Enlighten us all with your insightful thoughts on evolution. He might as well have asked her to explain cold fusion. I don't know, she said in a voice so small that only highly trained rescue dogs could have heard it. Unacceptable, he barked. Have you read the material? Gwen nodded and shrugged. What does that mean? He said, making an exaggerated shrug, imitating her. Gwen shrugged again. She looked ready to cry. I'll answer for you, he said. You read it, but you didn't understand it. Would that be accurate? Gwen gave him a sad smile and a weak nod. Pathetic. Sit, Windsor commanded, as if talking to a dog. These are not difficult concepts, except to you, maybe. Gwen sat down, both relieved and humiliated. She may not have understood the chapter on evolution, but she sure didn't deserve to be treated like that. Windsor spun and pointed right at me. Marcus O'Mara. I didn't flinch. I was hoping he'd nail me. I'm giving you a gift, Mr. O'Mara, Windsor exclaimed. The underwhelming Miss Oliver is an easy act to follow. He chuckled at what he thought was a clever remark. Nobody else did. I stared straight at the guy and didn't answer. Well, Windsor said impatiently. I looked him square in the eye and didn't say a word. Did you hear me, Mr. O'Mara? Or are your ears as disengaged as your brain? I did my best impersonation of a statue. Should I interpret your silence as proof that you don't understand the material either? I gave him nothing. Not a twitch, not a blink. Windsor fidgeted nervously. He wasn't used to having kids do anything but tremble in fear when he got in their faces. I'm waiting for a response, Mr. O'Mara, Windsor said with a touch of uncertainty. I stood up slowly and walked deliberately to the front of the class. I don't think anybody was breathing because only the sounds I heard were those of my own footsteps. I walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and in bold blue letters wrote, You're a teacher, try teaching. When I hit the period for emphasis, the class erupted in cheers. Windsor's face went red with rage. He raised his hands and the class quieted down, waiting for the next move. That buys you 2 days detention, he said through clenched teeth. I turned back to the board and wrote, and you'll still be a lousy teacher. The class broke out in wild applause and whistles. I held the marker out towards Windsor, stared him down, and dropped it to the floor. Boom. The kids all jumped to their feet and cheered. Even Gwen Oliver joined in, smiling broadly. That afternoon after school, I found myself in an empty classroom spending the first of 5 days in detention. I didn't care. We're always getting lectures about the evils of bullying. In my opinion, those rules apply to teachers, too. So that's the beginning. So you get to meet Marcus O'Mara. Marcus O'Mara is the guy, he's the star of these books. He's the one who gets the key that opens up the door to the library, that he has to find the stories that he goes in to try to solve the mysteries. And he's going to solve the mystery of what happened to the Sweeney family when Mr. Sweeney went over the edge. Okay, we have like no time left. We're out of here at 11, right? Are we out? Okay, all right, guys, thank you very much. I hope you, if you have any questions, you come talk to me afterwards, okay? Good job. You know, I always base my stories on kind of like real life, people I know, and things like that. That Mr. Windsor teacher, my daughter had a teacher like that.
Wait, does the dad come back?
As a ghost. Because there's a secret. happy Read Across America Day. This is very exciting because who here loves to read? Right. Awesome. Me too. And that's good because I'm a writer. So I like when people like to read. Here's what we're going to do. My name is DJ MacHale, and I'm a writer. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about, first, before I read, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am and how I got to do writing the stuff I write and how I ended up on the stage in front of you guys today. And then I got to read a couple chapters from one of my books. Okay? And then if you have questions based on my scintillating talk or books, save them for the end, okay? Now, if you have to thank Ms. Seaborn, she's the one who brought me here today. She's from PTA. Thank you, Seaborn. So if you like my talk, you're welcome. If you don't like my talk, it's her fault. Okay? So thank you for having me here today. And now you guys have to thank me for getting you out of class. Yes. I know how that works. Who's talking today? Who cares? No math. Okay. My name is DJ MacHale, and I am a writer. And there are all different kinds of writers, all different kinds of things that are written. There's books, and there's movies, and there's TV shows, and there's music, and there's poetry, and there's instructions, and there's a kid in the earlier class said, when I said, what things are written? He said, the Declaration of Independence. Absolutely, that was written. Laws are written. There's all different kinds of writers, all different kinds of writing. We have one thing in common is that we use words to tell stories or to share information. Now, what I do is I write books. These are some of my books. I think I've published about 25 books, I think. I don't read as fast as I write. I'm a pretty fast writer. But I also do TV shows. And I'll tell you a little bit how I got to do that. Okay, I ask you guys a question. Now, this is a quiet question, a show of hands question. No discussion necessary. Teachers must close their eyes. Don't look. Okay. By a show of hands, who here, quietly, who hates to write? Okay. No one raised their hands, teachers. It's unbelievable. You can look now. Okay. Everyone loves it. Okay, who likes to write? Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay, here's the important question. Who here is too cool to raise their hand no matter what I ask? Okay, the reason I asked that question, not the too cool question, the reason I asked that question about hating to write is because when I was your age, I hated to write. No joke, hate is a strong word, not in this case. I hated everything there was to do with writing. I hated having to sit still in the chair. I hated not running around outside. I hated not hanging out with my friends. I hated looking with a blank piece of paper I had to fill up with words I didn't care about. I hated grammar, sentence structure, spelling. I still hate spelling. Whoever that person is who invented spell checker, my hero. I use their work every day. But because I hated to write so much, it put me on a road to becoming a writer. How is that possible? I'll tell you. You guys have to write reports, right? Because whether you like it or not, you're all writers, because you have to write for school, right? And the same back when I was a kid, still had to write stuff. And if you were like me, when you got an assignment, you had to write about something you didn't care about, like cheese or Antarctica or something. In my day, you'd go to the library, get the encyclopedia. Today, they call it Google. You look up an article about cheese or whatever it is. You look up, and then you don't do this. Use me as a bad example. You would pretty much copy the article. You change the words around so it looked like you wrote it. That's bad. That's plagiarism. You don't do that. And I did that because I hated to write. Or sometimes you have to hit a word count. You have assignments like that where it's like, write a 300-word report on the Titanic. I would count the words because I didn't want to write a 301-word report. So my report would sound like this. The Titanic was a very, very humongously big boat. And it was so incredibly, tragically sad when it sank in the deep, dark, cold, murky water. You know, as many words as I come up with to spread it out to hit 300 and stop because I hated to write. But things actually changed for me in middle school. There was a guy in our school. He was the media specialist. He wasn't the librarian, he was a media specialist. I'm not sure what he did. He had an office next to the library, and he had a TV in there. I think he was like watching SpongeBob all day or something. I don't know what it was. But he's a good guy. And one day he called me to his office and said, hey, DJ, we just got this thing in. Do you want to use it? Now follow me on this. He called it a portable videotape recorder. Now this was the olden days. There was nothing portable about this thing. Nowadays, it's like your phone is better quality than most movie cameras. This thing was old, it was black and white, and it was reel to reel, it was giant. And I don't know where the school got it, I think they stole it from someplace. And he said, do you want to use this? And I said, no. But then I had an idea. I went back to some of my teachers and I said, rather than write a report on whatever the thing is I have to write a report on, because I hate it to write, can I make a videotape about it instead? And the teachers were like, yeah, sure, you can do that. Yeah. So my friends and I got together and we got out of writing. So we would make video stories about whatever the topics were to get out of writing. And we made comedies, we made dramas, we made informational films, who here today, and if you raise your hand, you're a liar. Who knows who the Marx Brothers are? Do you really? No, you're a liar. There's no reason you should. The Marx Brothers were a comedy team from back in the 1930s, going on 100 years ago. They were very popular back then. They made a lot of movies. That's not them. What we have here are 4 slackers who, in order to get out of writing a paper about the Marx Brothers, instead we made an original Marx Brothers movie. That's me being Groucho on the side over there. So we thought we were so smart because we were getting out of writing, we were having fun. And best of all, teachers, back in those days, kids weren't, kids make movies all the time nowadays. You're making TikToks, you're making movies all the time. Back in those days, nobody was doing this. So teachers had no idea how to grade these things. So we always got A's. But the joke was on us because what we didn't realize is that by trying to get out of writing, we were doing nothing but write. Because writing isn't just about sitting and putting words on a piece of paper. Writing is coming up with ideas and concepts. Think of it like building a house. If you're going to build a house, you don't run out, grab a handful of nails and a hammer, and start whacking nails into a board. Before you do that, you have to think of the big picture. What kind of house do I want? Is it going to be 2 stories, 1 story? Is the door going to be over here? Is it going to be blue, stucco, wood? All the kind of fun concepting stuff is as much building a house as it is whacking a nail into a board. Well, writing is as much getting into your head and thinking using your imagination as it is writing words on a piece of paper. Let me demonstrate how I spend most of my day. Okay? I'm a professional writer, best-selling author, professional writer, won awards. And this is how I spend my day. Oh, lunchtime. That's it, because I'm thinking of stuff. It is the best job in the world. I make up stories as a job. So, but I thought I hated writing. When I got out of high school, I decided, but I like filmmaking. So I went to college to study film production. I went to New York University. But to be a director or producer, none of this writing stuff, because I hated writing. And the first day in class, I went to my writing teacher, because you have to take writing. And I went to my writing teacher and said, this is going to be ugly. And she said, why? I said, I hate to write. And you know what she did? She laughed at me. I was like, well, you can't, don't do that. She said, DJ, you like making up stories, right? Yeah. And you like telling stories? Yeah. And based on the reaction you get back from your stories, you change your story, like you make it funnier, scarier, whatever. Yeah. She says, doofus, what do you think writing is? I was like, oh. So all those years I thought I was getting out of writing. She said, yeah, you probably wrote more than any kid who ever went through that high school. Oh. Okay, fine. I'm still not a fan to this day. I'm not a fan of sitting down looking at that blank piece of paper or blank computer screen. But I love telling stories. You want to call it writing? Fine. I got out of college. I'm writer man. Now what? What do you do? Let me give you a little advice, a little wisdom. If you want to do something creative with your life, and there's so many things you could do that are creative, not just writing, but think of all the creative things you could do with your life. You could be an actor. You could be a musician. You could be a chef creating new dishes. You could be an architect designing buildings. You could be a clothing designer designing plaids, or whatever it is. There's so many creative things you can do with your life. The trouble with that is you can't necessarily choose what that's going to be. Because you have to find out what's in here before you can decide what's going to come out. And what's in here is different for everybody. It's who you are, the things you've done, your friends, your family, your experiences, the books you've read, the places you've been. All those things are going to make up who you are. And that's what terms of what comes out. You guys know who Stephen King is? Yes. Wrote It, you know, Pennywise and all kind of stuff. Somebody once asked him, why do you write horror stories? He said, I don't know, that's what comes out. And it's true, Stephen King is not going to write a romantic comedy. Not going to happen. That's not going to come out. Well, I didn't know that. So when I got out of college, I'm a writer, man. It's like, what should I write? I don't know. So I started writing all the stuff I thought I should be writing. I started writing deeply dramatic, important screenplays about, you know, the kind of stuff you get Oscars for, and it's really important and all that kind of stuff. And I was getting nothing but no. That's the other thing. You want to do something creative with your life, you're going to hear no all the time. And it's not because people are mean, though some are. It's because when you create something, no matter how awesome it is, there'll be some people who don't like it. They'll tell you no. Well, I was getting nothing but no, until a friend of mine said, hey, did you ever think about writing for kids? And I said, no. Who am I, Dr. Seuss? I'm not going to write for kids, get out of here. But then I thought about it. It's like, okay, I don't want to write for kids, but if I did, what would I write about? And suddenly, honest to goodness, it's like the floodgates opened up. And all these ideas came flying out, and suddenly I had a stack of material. And I was like, whoa, I may be slow, but I'm not dumb. Maybe this is what comes out. So I started writing for kids, and people started saying yes. Now, the first stuff I did were TV shows. All these shows, except for the one, a couple have been rebooted recently. They're before your time, but you may have heard of them. Who here today has read Encyclopedia Brown, Boy Detective? Read the Encyclopedia Brown books? I wrote the one and only TV series based on those books. It was on HBO, EB. Who here watches or watched or still watches Nickelodeon? Have you seen the reboot of the show, Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yes.
I created Are You Afraid of the Dark? We made that show in the 90s. We did 91 episodes. And they just rebooted it recently. And there's proof of that. There's me. There's the 90s me with my Midnight Society. The one with the beard. It's a bunch of kids and an old guy. I'm the old guy. And much younger than I am now. This next picture is kind of fun. I'm also a director. And I directed a lot of the episodes. We had 91 episodes. And I was directing an episode with a vampire. And we're standing on the set waiting for the shot to get set up, and I'm standing next to the vampire. And I thought, I wonder what happens when you bite the neck of a vampire. So I bit the neck of a vampire. Nothing happened. I don't think he was a real vampire. I'm not sure. I could be wrong about that. But besides it being kind of a silly, fun picture, a couple of years ago, I showed this to a school like this, and one kid in the back goes, "Oh, is that Michael Jackson?" It's like, no, that's not Michael Jackson. Whoa, that looks like Michael Jackson. So I'm starting to tell people that Michael Jackson was in Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's not like he can deny it. You think? Okay, I'm going to ask a really dumb question now because I know the answer. At least I know 99% of the answer. Who here has gone down the street and been to Disneyland? Or better still, California Adventure. Okay. The reason I asked that question, and who here has ridden on the ride formerly known as Tower of Terror?
Oh, I love that ride. Yes.
So, no longer Tower of Terror, but it's Tower of Terror. So the reason I asked that question is because I was the first guy who wrote and directed a movie based on a Disney theme park ride, Tower of Terror. It was on The Wonderful World of Disney with Steve Guttenberg and Kirsten Dunst. And now they're making movies about pirates, and it's all cool because it's Johnny Depp, but fine. The last show I did was finished like 2009. It was a show called Flight 29 Down. It was a show about kids that crash landed on a tropical island, had to figure out how to survive. It was like somewhere between Gilligan's Island and Lord of the Flies. And no one heard of this show until High School Musical came out, the original High School Musical, because Corbin is in High School Musical. So now I'm writing for kids, and people are saying yes because I'm writing what comes out. And then I had an idea. It was an idea that was kind of too long for a movie, too expensive for a TV show. So I decided I'm going to write a book series. So I sat down and I outlined this book series. And as I'm outlining, I thought, whoa, this isn't just one book. This could be 10 books. So I outlined this whole 10-book series, and I put together a proposal. And I went to my management company, and I said, I want to write a book series. What do you think? Guess what this guy said? He gave me the answer you always hear. No. No, this is terrible. No one's ever going to want to read this, and you're ugly. He didn't say the ugly part, but it felt like it. So one of the things you have to, if you want to do something creative with your life, the advice I give you is you can't take no for an answer. Like I said before, because you're going to get it. Not because people are mean, because not everyone's going to like what you did. And this guy didn't like what I did. But I took my advice, and I said, okay, thank you very much. Give me that back. And I went to the next office, and I said, what do you think? This guy said, maybe. Maybe is better than no, unless it comes from your parents. All right? Can we go to the movies tonight? Maybe. You're not going. Maybe equals no in the teacher's hand, in the parents' handbook. But he wasn't my dad. And a year later, my first Pendragon book was published, Pendragon, the Merchant of Death. I think some of you actually bought it right now. And I didn't even think it was going to get published, but all 10 books got published. It was a 10-book series, and it's this huge adventure that follows Bobby Pendragon from 14 to 18 years old and his adventure through time and space. And not only did it get published, it became this huge international best-selling thing in all 30 different languages. I actually have a copy. I should put this in my presentation. I have a copy of the page from the New York Times bestseller list. Number 1 was Pendragon. Number 3 was Harry Potter. Number 6 was Harry Potter. It's like, it was out for like a minute. It was better than Harry Potter. So it was huge. And, why, thank you. And because of this, I got to write a bunch of other stuff. So I wrote a lot of other books. So now, what I'm going to do for you guys right now, I'm going to read to you a couple chapters from one of my books. All right? It is Read Across America Week, so now we're going to read across Fullerton. And that book is Silo. Silo is a trilogy. The first book is Silo. Second one is Storm. Third one is Strike. It is kind of a science fiction adventure book. It's not a spooky book. It's science. It's an adventure. What I'm going to try to do, I think we'll have time. I want to read to you the first couple of chapters, okay? Because that'll give you a real feel for what the book is like. All right? Everybody set? Yes. Close your eyes. Clear your brain. Chapter 1. It was the perfect night for a football game and for death. And that's chapter 1. What do you think of that? One of the things that you've probably heard from teachers, but certainly I hear it as an adult and an author and whatnot, is that you have to try to, I'm going to give you some advice before I continue on. You have to try to grab your readers right away. A lot of times you only get one sentence or 2 sentences. So I think those are 2 pretty good sentences to make you go, oh, I will continue reading. I'm going to give you guys a bit of reading advice. Since this is Reading Across America, I got this from a school librarian once. How many times have you picked up a book and read the first couple of lines and just gone, nah, just tossed it? Like, nah, it happens all the time. Don't do that. What you should, in order to give the book a fair shake, what you should do is read your age. Meaning if you're 10 years old, read 10 pages. If you're 14 years old, read 14 pages. If you're 64, read 64 pages. By then, the book's over. But by then, if you read that number, you'll get a better idea if you're going to like the book or not. So, because if you make too quick of a judgment, you may be missing out on something you really like. Okay? But it's not that big of a commitment to read your age. So try that. Okay. It was the perfect night for a football game and for death. Not that the two have anything in common. When you hear the term sudden death, you normally don't expect there to be an actual loss of life, sudden or otherwise. But there was nothing normal about that night. It was the night it began, the night of the death, the first death. I was sitting on the end of the team bench, more interested in the cheerleaders than the game. To be honest, I didn't have much business being on the team. There weren't many freshmen on the Arbortown High varsity, but with a student population that barely squeaked past 200, if you had 2 legs and didn't mind being brutally punished by guys who were older, bigger, and faster than you, you were in. I'm not exactly sure why I accepted the role of living tackling dummy, but I like football and figured that in a few years I'd be the one running over hapless freshmen. So I guess I was paying my dues. My main duty during a game was to be the sprinter on the kickoff team. That meant I had to run directly for the guy who fielded the kick, which made me the first to get taken out by the wall of blockers who were intent on stopping that very thing. It was an ugly job, but at least it meant I'd come out of the game with a little dirt on my uniform. My other duty was to be the backup for our senior tailback, Marty Wiggins. That's why I spent most of my time on the bench watching the cheerleaders. Marty was a legend. He'd had big-time colleges sniffing around him since he was a sophomore. He was that good. But on that night, he was just sick. The stands were packed. For Arbortown High, that meant maybe 500 people. It wasn't exactly the Rose Bowl, but you wouldn't know that from the excitement Marty was generating. The place went nuts every time he got his hands on the ball because he was running over guys and knocking them aside like bowling pins. When he was tackled, which wasn't often, it took 3 players to drag him down. It was like watching a pro beating up on Pop Warner boys. He was in for most every play of the game until, with only a few minutes left, he dropped down next to me on the bench to take a rare breather. He sat there gulping air, staring back at the field. I figured his night was over, so I held up my fist for a knuckle bump and said, "Dude, awesome." Marty looked at me, and I froze. He had a fiery, wild look in his eyes that made me think for one terrifying moment that he was going to hit me. The guy was totally charged up with, what? Excitement? Anger? Insanity? He didn't bump knuckles, just as well. He might have broken my hand. I sat there like a fool with my fist hovering unbumped. I didn't want to say anything else for fear he'd drive his helmet through my face. Instead, he grabbed my forearm in a grip that was so fierce I had black and blue marks the next day. "What's happening?" he whispered through gasping breaths. He said it with a disturbing mix of fear and confusion that made me believe he truly didn't understand what was going on around him or with him. What do you mean?" I asked tentatively. "Wiggins," barked Coach. Marty jumped to his feet and sprinted back into the game as if he had been launched from a catapult. I was left on the bench not knowing what had just happened. The play was called and the team went to the line. Marty was pitched the ball and he rumbled around left end for another 15 yards. All was well. Marty was fine. I chalked up his odd behavior to adrenaline and the excitement of the game that went back to my all-important cheerleader review. Arbortown is a pretty small place, so going to a high school football game was the best thing to do on Friday nights in the fall. Okay, the only thing to do. As I scanned the crowd, I saw many people I knew, including my mother and father. Dad gave me a big smile and a thumbs up. Mom wasn't as enthusiastic. She hated that I played football. Her deep frown meant she was expecting me to get injured just by sitting on the bench. I gave them a small wave, then looked away to notice a strange face in the crowd. It belonged to a man with longish blonde hair wearing a hoodie. He looked like a surfer dude, complete with beard stubble and a single earring. He stood out amid the sea of fans because he was the only one not cheering. Instead, he wrote furiously in a small notebook. I figured he might have been a college scout. It would explain why Marty was playing like he was possessed. This could be a scholarship showcase for him. "Button up," Coach ordered as he strode past. "We're going to score again." That meant all the wretched scrubs, like me, had to be ready for another kickoff. We were on the 10-yard line and about to go in. There were only a few seconds left in the game, and I was surprised that, seeing it was a blowout, Coach hadn't pulled Marty. Maybe he knew there was a scout in the crowd taking notes. Or maybe he didn't trust Marty's backup, me. I stood up with the rest of the team and cheered for the offense. It felt cheesy to be screaming for another score since the game had been over since halftime, but what can you do? It's football. The team came up to the line. The QB called signals, and the ball was snapped. Marty took the handoff, no big surprise, and blasted into the line off right tackle. The defense had had enough. They didn't want any part of him. There were a few half-hearted arm tackles that didn't even slow him down as he burst into the end zone. Touchdown. The crowd exploded once again, cheering ecstatically while the band kicked in with our fight song, Jericho. The cheerleaders jumped around and hugged each other like we just won a championship, and all we'd done was add pad to an already lopsided score. Marty sprinted to the back of the end zone, turned to the stands, threw his arms up in triumph, and dropped dead. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. All I saw was Marty fall over and land on his back. First, I thought it was some new kind of celebration dance, like spiking himself instead of the ball. Our players were jumping on each other, chest bumping and high-fiving. When they finally got around to focusing on the guy who was the cause of the celebration, they pulled on his arms to help him up. Marty didn't respond. In seconds, the emotion of the moment flipped from elation to concern. "Hey," our guys yelled while waving to the sideline for help. "He's hurt." The crowd noise died instantly. It was a rude jolt to experience the sudden and dramatic change from joyous cheers and music to absolute silence. Coach sprinted onto the field, waving at the other players to back away. He was quickly joined by a paramedic. With the rest of our offense huddled nearby, watching expectantly, the paramedic knelt down to examine Marty. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that something serious had happened to our superstar. As he lay still on the grass, 2 more paramedics ran out to the field with a fracture board. I turned around to look at my parents. Dad's expression now matched Mom's. They knew something horrible had happened. Everyone knew. A few seconds later, we heard the urgent scream of a far-off siren. I didn't look back to the field right away because I was mesmerized by the communal look of anxiety and horror on the faces of each and every person in the stands. All eyes were on the end zone and the guy lay on his back, not moving. People cleared a path for Marty's dad, who pushed his way through to get to the field. The poor guy was about to find out that his son had just gone from playing the game of his life to taking the final breath of his life. Every last person feared they were witnessing something horrific, something they would never forget. Nobody moved as they waited for the news they knew wouldn't be good. Almost nobody, that is. As I stared at the stands, I noticed that one person had already left. He hadn't even stuck around long enough for the ambulance to arrive. The surfer dude with the notebook was gone. It was the night of the death, the first death, and it was only the beginning. Okay, I'm going to move on to chapter 2 so you can learn a little bit more about what's going on here, okay? I needed a midnight ride. Gotta get out. I sent the text to my best friend, Quinn Carr. He would know what it meant. It was a custom that Quinn and I had started shortly after we first met in middle school. Whenever one of us couldn't sleep, we'd sneak out of our houses and meet up with our bikes near the town pier at the end of Main Street. From there, we'd saddle up, turn on our headlights, and race each other along the frontage road that circled Pemberwick Island, our home. We usually went after midnight, which meant there was little or no traffic to deal with, especially since we always took a remote route that traveled along the beach and away from civilization. It was 10 miles of frantic insanity, since most of the time it was too dark to see beyond the throw of our headlights, and neither of us would bow to safety and slow down. A major crash might change that thinking, but neither of us had ever been thrown so far. Quinn came up with the idea. He said the rides would release endorphins into our systems that would shoot electrical impulses to the brain, and that helped reduce stress and create a feeling of well-being. Quinn was always coming up with things like that. I think he spent too much time watching Discovery Channel and reading Wikipedia. All I knew was that the rides were a perfect outlet for blowing off steam and working out problems. And that night, I was definitely having a problem. I couldn't stop thinking about Marty. How could somebody that young and in such great shape just die? I lay in bed only hours after the game, trying to keep my mind from replaying his final moments over and over. But it was no use. Sleep would not come. I threw on my sweats, grabbed my helmet, and left my bedroom the only way possible at that hour of the night, through my window. My parents wouldn't have been too happy if they knew I was flying around the island in the middle of the night. So I quietly made my way across the roof, over the porch, and shinnied down a column to the ground. I kept my bike in the garage, which was separate from the house. So there was little chance of my parents hearing. I'd done it enough times that I had it down to a quiet science. Less than 5 minutes after I sent the text to Quinn, I was in the saddle and pedaling toward town. It was long past midnight, and Arbortown had shut down for the night. The restaurants closed by 10 and the shops long before that. It was a tourist beach town, not an after-hours hangout. I rode straight to the town pier where the ferry boat that made the 5-mile run between Pembroke Island and Portland, Maine, was tied up. It was a huge old thing that carried not only people, but trucks and cars as well. During the busy summer months, it was incredible to see the number of people and vehicles that would flood off that vessel. It was like watching one of those circus clown cars. I had no idea how it could handle so much weight and not sink. I'm sure Quinn knew. He had read it on Wikipedia. At that hour, the ferry and the pier were quiet. The ferry boat wouldn't be fired up again until 5 in the morning. Then it would start making round trips to the mainland. I coasted to a stop at the head of the pier and pulled out my phone to see if Quinn had texted back when, "What took you so long?" came a familiar voice. I spun around to see Quinn lying on a bench. "No way," I exclaimed. "I only texted you 10 minutes ago." Quinn sat up, stretched, and rubbed his face. "I've been here since midnight," he replied with a yawn. "But," I thought a moment, then said, "You knew I'd want to ride." It's amazing how insightful I can be. "Did you hear what happened?" "Seriously?" Quinn exclaimed sarcastically. "We live on an island, Tucker. News like that travels at the speed of heat. Besides, I was there." "At the game? You hate football." "True, but I wasn't going to miss you playing in your first varsity game. Not that there was much playing involved, but you did have some all-pro bench sitting action going on." "Give me a break. Most of those guys are 3 years older than me." Quinn laughed. "I know. I think it's cool that you're even on the team. Crazy, but cool." Quinn and I couldn't have been more different from each other. Maybe that was why we got along so well. He was tall and thin like a lanky scarecrow with a wild mop of curly blonde hair, that rarely saw a brush. He wore heavy frame glasses that sat on his big nose, making him look like he was wearing one of those Halloween glasses with nose combos. But it worked for him. Didn't hurt that he's incredibly smart, and enjoyed the fact that he stood out in a crowd. I, on the other hand, was more of the blending in type. I stood a good head shorter than Quinn and kept my brown hair cut short. I wouldn't consider myself particularly brainy, though I weighed in with a solid B- average in school. Not bad in my book. Unfortunately, my parents had a different book. I was tired of hearing, "Tucker Pierce, you are not living up to your potential." How did they know what my potential was? How could anyone know? It was a constant argument that often led to a midnight ride. Quinn jammed his helmet down over his bushy hair and pulled down goggles over his glasses. He looked like a dork and couldn't have cared less. "What do you think happened to Marty?" I asked. Quinn shrugged. "We'll know more tomorrow." "Why's that?" "My parents are doing the autopsy as we speak." The quiet night suddenly got quieter. I'd forgotten that Quinn's mom and dad were doctors at Arbortown Medical. "Oh, right," I said softly. "Thanks for that image." "Hey, you asked. Let's ride." I did my best to shake the gruesome reality as we mounted up, flicked on our headlights, and pedaled out of town. Quinn and I rarely spoke during these 10-mile rides because the whole point was to push ourselves physically and mentally. It took serious concentration to keep from hitting a pothole or a patch of sand that would lead to a painful case of road rash, especially at that speed we were going, at night, with only a small light focused on the pavement ahead. The winding road was full of dips and turns, which meant we had to stay focused or end up with broken bones. The route took us along the perimeter of Pembroke Island. We traveled clockwise, which meant the ocean was to our right. The 4-lane road never got much closer than 100 yards from the beach. At times there'd be thick forest between us and the water. Other times we'd pass sandy bluffs covered in seagrass that gave us a clear view of the water. We occasionally passed a darkened house, but most of the route was through undeveloped terrain that hadn't changed in, well, ever. There was no moon out, which normally meant a dark trip, but it was one of those nights that was so incredibly clear you could see most every star in the sky. Downtown Portland was well over 5 miles away across the water, so there were no lights to prevent the sky from lighting up with millions of tiny sparkles. It was so bright that I considered turning off my headlight, but figured I still needed to see obstacles in the road. So I directed the beam to hit just ahead of my front tire. It didn't take long before I was breathing hard and sweating, which was exactly what I needed. I could feel the tension drift away. I don't know if it was about releasing endorphins or about forcing myself to focus on something as simple as working out. But the ride was doing the job. Quinn was a genius, not only because he knew this would help, but because he knew I needed it. "What's that?" he called to me. "What's what?" "Listen." All I could hear was the sound of our tires rolling over the blacktop and turning of our chains. "I don't hear anything," I replied. "You don't hear that?" he asked. "You hear that?" "You don't hear that?" he asked. "It's like music." I listened again and heard it. It was a single steady note that drifted on the breeze. It was faint, but definitely there. It didn't sound natural, like wind through the trees or migrating whale. It was too precise for that. The note changed and hung there for a few seconds, then changed again. It wasn't a tune, but a series of notes held steady, as if being played by an unseen electric piano. It came and went, sometimes loud and clear, other times more audible. Hardly audible. "What is it?" I asked. "There aren't any houses around here." We slowed and sat up on our seats. "It wouldn't be from a house," Quinn said, using his analytical voice. "It's got to be moving because we haven't passed it." "Look," I shouted, pointing out to sea. Something was moving over the ocean. I saw it move beyond a dip in the bluffs. It was a shadow, a big one. We had gained elevation and were traveling along a section of bluffs that rose and fell. When the terrain dropped down, we can see an odd mass moving over the water. When the bluffs rose again, we'd lose sight of it. "Speed up," Quinn commanded, and we dug in to catch the strange shadow. "Is it a whale?" I asked, breathless. "It's not in the water. It's moving above it like a boat." "A boat with no running lights?" It was pitch black and looked to be the size of a small airplane. The only reason I thought it could be anything other than an actual shadow was that it was giving off the musical sounds. Shadows didn't do that. When it cleared a bluff, we could hear it. When it was blocked by a dune, so was the music. It was treacherous trying to stay with it while keeping one eye in the shadow and another on the road ahead. "Somebody's on the bluff," Quinn called. Sure enough, with the stars providing light, I could see that somebody else was keeping pace with the shadow too. It was a rider on horseback, charging across the dunes. It was impossible to see who it might be because they had to be 100 yards away from us. Whoever it was had to be an experienced rider because they were galloping over some treacherous terrain. I saw the shadow again as it appeared beyond a dip in the bluffs. Could be a low-flying plane, Quinn offered. Again, no running lights, I countered. No engine sound either. The guy on horseback passed a pickup truck that was parked on the bluff. Pickup trucks weren't unique on Pembroke, except when they were sitting on top of bluffs in the middle of nowhere, middle of the night. It stopped, Quinn announced. I looked ahead to a break in the dunes and didn't see the shadow. The horseback rider realized the same thing, pulled up and trotted back the other way. Quinn and I put on the brakes. Though we could no longer see the shadow, we could still hear it. The music was growing louder. This is freaking me out, I said. Where did it go? Quinn didn't need to answer, for the shadow suddenly reappeared, this time rising straight up above the bluffs. That's no boat, Quinn said, dumbfounded. The shadow lifted ever so slowly toward the sky as the notes began changing more frequently, as if the rising movement required more energy. I looked to the sky, hoping to see a source of light that could be creating a huge moving shadow. There was nothing but stars except for where the shadow was. The entity seemed to be sucking up light, looking more like a dark gash in the sky than something with substance. It was oval-shaped, like a flying manta ray. There was no way to tell how big it was or how close it was to shore because there was nothing to give it perspective. We stood there, straddling our bikes, staring at the rising shape, dumbstruck. Quinn put it best. What the hell? A brilliant streak of light appeared so unexpectedly that there was no way to know where it was or where to come from. It was blinding, especially since we had been straining so hard to see the shadow in the dark. Quinn and I threw up our arms to shield our eyes, which was smart because the streaking flash was only a prelude. Boom! The shadow exploded like a massive 4th of July skyrocket. Sparkling particles flew out from the center of the black hole, lighting up the horizon, momentarily turning night into day. The horse on the bluff reared up in surprise. Its silhouette burned into my eyes. I had no idea if the rider stayed in the saddle because a second later we were hit with a wave of heat and sound that knocked us off our feet. I fell back, getting my feet twisted in my bike and landing on my butt. Still, I kept my eyes open to see what was happening. If I had had a few seconds to think, I probably would have run for cover, but it all happened too fast to think. Like an exploding firework, thousands of dazzling, sparkler-like particles spread across the sky. They hovered for a moment, then fell to the ocean. Seconds later, the fiery storm hit the water, extinguishing each and every bit of light. The event lasted no more than 15 seconds. Once again, it was dark. The shadow was gone. The music was gone. I couldn't even see if the horseback rider was still on the bluff. The only sign left of what we had witnessed was the ringing in my ears. I turned to Quinn. He looked as stunned as I felt. He gave me a wide-eyed look through his glasses and goggles and smiled. Well, there's that, he said with a shrug. Under other circumstances, I might have laughed. This has been the freaking longest night of my life, I said with dismay. Yeah, he replied, and it's not over yet. So those are the first 2 chapters of Silo. So as you can imagine, this is a story about these guys who live on this island called Pembroke Island, and strange things start to happen. And you've just heard the beginning of them. One thing I said to somebody before, that this is a trilogy. There are 3 stories: Silo, Storm, and Strike. At the end of the first book, the end of Silo, you won't know who the good guys and who the bad guys are. At the end of the second book, Storm, you'll know who the bad guys are. But you still won't know why they're doing what they're doing. In the third book, Strike, it's all revealed. And all the clues are there, starting with what I've already read to you. So if you do get a chance to read these books, pay close attention, because I lay in clues through the beginning that hopefully when you get to the end, in Strike, when the kind of big reveal happens of what's going on, what I want you to do is go, oh, I didn't, oh, right, that's what that one, that's who he did, that's why she's, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully you won't go, what? This doesn't make sense. I haven't gotten that yet. But I defy you to figure out what's really going on. Some people have figured out little bits and pieces of it, but they never figured out the whole story. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. Do you guys have any questions about anything? About books, about writing, about, yes sir, right there, in the red. It's hard to tell. It depends on how long the book is too. The most fun for me when I'm writing a new book is the beginning, because that's when I have a good idea. And then what I do is I write an outline. And do you guys have to write outlines? Again, remember I hate to write. When I was in school, if the teacher said I had to write an outline, I'd be like, whoa, wait a minute. You want me to write an outline, then you want me to write the report. That's like 2 reports. It really isn't. The great thing about outlines is you're not worried about the words. Anyone's going to read them. Only you're going to read them, unless it's an assignment. But for me, I like to write down my ideas because no one's ever going to read it. I don't have to sweat the details. I don't have to sweat the verbiage. I don't have to sweat anything. But I can get all my ideas down and shape the whole story. That's really fun. That could take any time from years to days. You know, it depends how the ideas come. The hardest part for me is writing that first draft, when I'm actually writing words that people might read. For the book like Silo, it might take 3 months, something like that. But then after I finish the first draft, you guys are going to hate to hear this too, it gets fun again, because rewriting, it makes it so much better. If you guys take anything out of my talk today about writing, other than don't take no for an answer, if you want to improve your writing 1,000%, you get an assignment in school, right? Right? That 300-word report on Titanic. Don't wait till the last minute to write it. Write it pretty early on. And then, there's more. You're not done yet. Then put it aside and forget about it. Because what happens is, when you write that first draft, you're sweating all the details. Oh, what word am I going to use? How am I going to say? And you're not thinking of the big picture. Put it aside and forget about it. Then maybe a couple days before it's due, take it out again and read it. You will look at it with entirely new perspective. And you'll read it. I do this and I read it, I'm like, I can't believe I wrote that. Oh my God. And you see all the problems. Rewriting becomes very easy. Your writing will improve, your paper will improve 1,000%. I promise you. It's like magic. As soon as you stop thinking about it and think about other stuff for a couple of days, and then come back to it, you look at it the way your teacher's going to look at it, with fresh eyes. And you're going to see all the problems, and you'll make it so much better. So that rewriting process could take a really long time, depending on copywriting and getting to the editor and editor's comments and whatnot. That could take months. But the biggest chunk of straight-ahead work time might be about 3 months. The time on either end varies. Yes?
How many books have you written ever since you first started to this day?
How many books have I written since I started to this day? I think it's about 25. If you then add on books that were written by other people based on my stories, you could triple that. Because like Flight 29 Down, that TV show, there's a series of books. I wrote all the scripts, but a series of books came out about that. There were spin-off Pendragon books. We did Are You Afraid of the Dark books. So if you count the number of books with my name on it, it might be about 70 books, something like that. But the ones that I wrote, written by DJ MacHale here, probably about 25. Yeah. Yes?
How long have you been an author for?
How long have I been an author for? Not that long. Because remember, I had a whole career making TV shows before I started writing books. So the first Pendragon book was published in 2002. So I guess the answer is 18 years. So that's about that, yeah. Yeah. And I'm way older than 18, so I started late. Yeah.
I'm not sure, but the red one,
Yep.
the light, is that a horror book?
Yes. That is, it's called Morpheus Road. That's about a guy who is being hunted and haunted by a demon. And he's actually a cartoonist. He's a high school kid. He's a cartoonist, and he's created this character, and it's the character that's on the cover of that book. He calls him Gravedigger. Gravedigger comes to life. And he's not entirely sure if Gravedigger has really come to life or it's all in his head. And the story starts out, it's a straight-ahead ghost story in the beginning. It's a spooky ghost story. It's a trilogy as well. The second book, I'll tell you, Morpheus Road is the road between the living and the dead. With each book, you travel further along the Morpheus Road. And it ultimately grows from a spooky story. I shouldn't give stuff away, but it goes from a spooky story that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger into this much otherworldly kind of crazy thing. So yeah, it's a horror story. Go ahead. Yes, you're right there. Yep. I was inspired to write Silo. Like I said, you always have to write things that you know. And even though I'm writing a story, that stuff didn't happen to me. But so it's like, what do you mean? Your guy didn't die during a football game? What are you, crazy? you always have to start with something real and then build on it. That's where you make the fantasy or the fiction come true. So I wanted to write a story about two things. I wanted to write a story about a guy who was kind of average. In fact, he described himself in that chapter I wrote, that he's a solid B- student. That was me. But he's perfectly happy with that. But then he is given the opportunity to do something. He's put into a situation that he's got to rise above himself and do something incredible, which he does over the course of the thing. So I want to start with a character like that. I also like the idea of writing a story. My Pendragon series and my Morpheus Road series that I wrote before that were huge stories. Pendragon takes place on 10 different worlds throughout the universe. You know, it's a huge story. So I wanted to write a contained story. So most of the first book, Silo, all takes place on that island. And so I wanted to write a contained kind of mystery that all happens on this island. And the island is based on a real place. It's called Martha's Vineyard, which is an island off of Cape Cod in Massachusetts. I guarantee you've probably never heard of Martha's Vineyard. If you saw the movie Jaws, you know Martha's Vineyard. That's where Jaws was shot. So it's that kind of vibe is Martha. So I wanted to create this whole thing. Because what happens, I'm not going to tell you what happens, but it's this amazing thing happens on this island. And it's up to Tucker and his friends to figure out how to solve the mystery. So that was kind of a couple of different ideas that came together. It was really funny. So I hadn't been to Martha's Vineyard since I was in college. But I remembered it so well, so I thought, I'm going to write this thing about Martha's Vineyard. I'm going to call it Pemberwick. But I think I should go back there to see what it's like today, because I haven't been there in a long time. I needn't have bothered. Went back to Martha's Vineyard. I spent a week there, and it's like nothing has changed. I'm looking around for the can of Coke I put down 30 years before. Oh, it's still here. Look at it. It was the exact, I mean, some of the stores had changed, but it was the exact, this place is timeless, which is perfect for my story. Yes?
What is your favorite book that you wrote?
Yeah, I don't have a favorite. That's like saying who's your favorite kid. You may have it, but you don't say it. So I honestly don't. I like them all for different reasons, but I will say that the book I'm most proud of, I'm not saying it's my best book, but it's the one I'm most proud of, is my 10th Pendragon book. And that's because in that book, I had to sum up all the threads of 9 books and make it all make sense, and have it come together and be satisfying, because there's so many stories to go through with those 9 books, and I wrapped them all up together, and so that was no small task. So I'm probably most proud of that book. Is it my best book? I don't know, but I'm most proud of that book. Let's go over here. Yes? Every day. He asked the question, you have that moment where you feel like you can't write? I'm full of advice for you guys. Writer's block. People always say, I have writer's block. But the way people describe writer's block isn't accurate. Usually people say, I have writer's block because they can't think of any ideas. That's not writer's block. That's, you can't think of any ideas. Writer's block, to me anyway, is you have so many things going on in your brain that are blocking you from concentrating on what you're trying to focus on. So I'm sure you guys experience all the time. Think about that. You're sitting home, you're doing your homework. And you're focusing like that, and you're like, okay, I have to read about the square root of so-and-so. What's on TV? I don't know. Okay, so now the square root of so-and-so, it's like, oh, I got a text from so I got to do that. All that stuff is blocking you from focusing on what you're trying to focus on. And that happens to me. You know, I'm sitting writing like this. My mind is on a million different things. I got to walk the dog. Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I got to do whatever. What I often do when that happens, I'll go out for a run. And somehow magically, that like clears away all the extraneous thoughts and allows me to focus on where I'm having trouble. One of the other things I do, this is a helpful tip, is I jump ahead in my story. Like if I'm writing a scene and the scene opens with, Fred walks into the room. And then I'm like, now what? I don't know. What does he do? I can't think. It's like, what do I do? I've trained myself to jump ahead because I know where it's going to go. It's like, well, eventually, Fred's going to jump out the window. So I go in my head to jumping out the window, then I backtrack. What are the things that might lead to Fred jumping out the window? And I backtrack all the way to the point he walks, and then I find it. So a lot of times, if you're writing stories and you don't know what's going to happen next, take a step back and think of your big story. That's one of the reasons I outline. I think of all the big story that's going to be and where it's going to end. Then when I go back to write it, I always know where I'm going to go. And a lot of times I write the outline and then throw it away. And the outline may have gone here, and my writing actually takes me there. But it's okay, because I always know where I'm going to end up. So it's a struggle every day. Writing is hard. There's no question about it. Yeah. Yeah. Written a book about what? Only every single book I've written. All the main characters in my books are different variations of me. And because I'm writing about young people, it's me when I was then. One example, Morpheus Road, the one about the guy being hunted by demons. There are two main characters. There's the guy who's the artist who writes the thing or draws the thing that comes to life. Then there's his best friend. Early on in the story, his best friend disappears, which means he's out of the story. So then as a writer, it becomes a challenge. It's like, well, how can I illustrate and show that these two are best friends if they're only together in the very beginning of you can't just say, he's my best friend. Trust me, he's my best friend. No, he's really my best friend. No, you want to show it rather than talk about it. So what I did was I wrote several scenes that was him remembering great things that they did together. And all those things are from my childhood. So it's all true stories. There's also a very scary scene in Morpheus Road, the first one, in the light. I grew up in a haunted house. No joke. And one of the scenes there is directly lifted from something actually happened to me. If you happen to read the book, The Light, it's the scene where Marshall is playing air drums. Not air guitar, he's playing air drums. If you read the book and you read that scene, that actually happened to me in real life. I'm not kidding. Until the end. Something big happens in the end that didn't happen to me. But everything leading up to that moment. So absolutely, I write about my childhood all the time. Okay, I think we have time for like 2 more questions, then I gotta let you guys go. Who has, okay, these gotta be 2 key questions because you guys, okay, good.
What gave you the inspiration and courage to keep on like going and finish the 10-book series?
My mortgage. It's amazing how pressure makes you creative. You know the saying that a task will expand to the amount of time you give it to complete or something like that? When I don't have a deadline, it takes me forever to write something. When I'm suddenly faced with a deadline, it's remarkable how quickly all these ideas start flowing. With a lot of my books, what I do is it'll take me, remember I said it takes 3 months to write a first draft? It may take me 2.5 months to write 2/3 of the book. And then I'll go away. We have a condo up in Mammoth. I'll go up to Mammoth for a week and write the last third of the book because I know I have a deadline. So it's practical. I mean, I joke about the mortgage, but that's kind of true. You know, it's your job. You got to do it. But it helps to have a deadline. What is more difficult is when you constantly keep getting told no. When you're trying to sell something. Like I've got a bunch of TV shows I'm selling now. I keep getting no, but you got to keep going. You can't. The only way you are officially going to fail is if you quit. So you just don't quit. Just last the longest. And eventually things will happen. Okay, one more question. This has got to be like the best question. After you ask it, everyone's going to go, that was a really good question. Pressure's on. Okay, good. Bye.
Did you make the front covers of like all the books?
No, I can barely draw breath. But I do have input on it. I do suggest to the author. With one of my silo books, I actually sketched something. It looked like a 2-year-old did it, but I did it. So they hire real talented authors, illustrators to do it. So I have input, but I don't. You can, no chance. Okay, one more. Go ahead.
What year did you start writing books and what inspired you to keep on writing?
Well, I think I answered both those questions already. 2002 is the first book and inspired me as my mortgage. Okay, one more. Way in the back.
What was the scene that actually happened?
In the light? Yeah, I got to read it and find out. It's the air drums. It was, in a nutshell, I was home alone, and I heard things that could not have been. I was 16 years old. I cannot explain it to this day. And it wasn't just like, oh, it was the wind. No, it was real. And And the house was haunted, and we know who the ghost was. So read that thing. Okay, one more. That was a quick one. Okay. Yep. Behind. Yeah, there you go. Real loud, real loud. Wherever books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. The thing that's great about, well, I shouldn't say this because I really love independent bookstores, but the thing about independent bookstores is that they're very small, and they're always bringing in new books. So I haven't had a new book come out in a while. So really, the best place to find my new books is you have to order it online. So that's why you can get them all on Amazon. Okay, and we are now officially out of time, my friends. So thank you very much. If you have books to sign, come on up and I'll sign them for you. Thank you.